Hello, and welcome to Cardiff Animation Festival online. My name's Lauren Orme, I'm the director of Cardiff Animation Festival, and I'm so excited to be bringing you this recorded Q&A between two of my absolute animation heroes. On Saturday, 28th of January 2023, we were lucky enough to host Nora Twomey in conversation with Joanna Quinn at Chapter Arts Centre in Cardiff. Nora Twomey is an Oscar and Golden Globe nominated director. She's also partner and creative director at Cartoon Saloon in Ireland. In a career spanning over 2 decades, Nora has worked in a number of capacities on Cartoon Saloon's creative output, most recently as director of feature film My Father's Dragon. In this Q&A, Nora talks us through her career in conversation with Joanna Quinn. Joanna is one of Britain's most distinctive animators. Her work explores the politics of gender and oppression, and Joanna's obsessive fascination and delight with exploring the eccentricities of the female body. Her short films have won BAFTAs and Emmys and all sorts of awards. When Joanna told me she'd met Nora at an Oscars party in LA and they'd had a great chat, I thought, now there are 2 people I would love to hear having a conversation. And luckily for all of us, they were both up for having a conversation with an audience. So here we go. Here's Nora Twomey in conversation with Joanna Quinn.
Yeah, so Nora has come all the way from Ireland for the day to do this especially. And I just want to say thank you, because I know this is, as they say in Hollywood, awards season, and you're very busy with your wonderful film. So thank you so much for taking the time to come over to Cardiff.
I would fly to Wales any day to have a conversation with Joanna Quinn.
Oh. Right. Okay, this is my big question that I want to try and work out. Is how did a young girl from Cork, who left school at 15 to work in a pea factory, end up part-owning one of the most successful animation companies in the world and the company has won 5 Academy nominations. How? Oh, all right. We can work that one out.
That's a big one.
But maybe to start off, could you tell us a bit about your background then? So what was this young Cork girl like then?
Well, I grew up on a farm. I was one of 7 children. I am one of 7. I always loved drawing. I think a lot of people that work in animation love drawing. Around the age of 10, a lot of people stop, and then animators and drawers tend to kind of continue on. We need it as a way of figuring out the world around us, I think. And for a lot of us, I think it's a very personal thing. And so I drew, but I didn't really know why or how or anything like that. And I worked I loved the farm. I really loved it. There's a film actually in the Oscar contention this year for Best International Film called On Colleen Kuhn, The Quiet Girl. And I started watching that and went, oh my God, it's me. I used to run away. It was about a young girl who doesn't really speak much, but she likes to just sit in the grass in a way that like almost kind of, she becomes part of the landscape, and she just tries to kind of, wanders through life. And that was pretty much me. I love nature, and I love the farm that I grew up on. But yeah, I fell through the cracks in school. I couldn't, I couldn't focus or contain my brain, I guess. In the way that you were expected to in the 70s and 80s in Ireland. I went through convent schools and tried to disappear, I guess. But I doodled all of the time, corners of my copybooks. I never really had a blank page to myself, because, you didn't buy sketchbooks in my town. They weren't available. And so, like, backs of, old cut-offs of wallpaper, things like that is what I would draw on. And yeah, I fell out of school. My dad passed away from cancer the year before I left school, and my mum was very understanding, and she knew that she should, not force me. And so, there were girls in my school that were forced. I could hear them screaming in the corridors, being pulled along to go back into school. But my mum didn't force me, and I worked on the farm for a bit, and then a neighbour of mine who used to make these reproduction porcelain and antique dolls, or not, well, there were reproductions of antiques for middle-aged ladies to buy in the 80s. So, in the backs of Woman's Weekly kind of magazine, those kind of dolls, those weird things. She was making them, and she asked, would I like to come and work for her? And I did. And she used to pay me a little check, that I would lodge in my bank. And I had a wonderful feeling of self-worth. I was doing something. I would pour this porcelain into molds and kind of go through this process every week. And I really, my confidence began to build up. And I saw Judy, my employer, kind of just, she'd a huge imagination, and that gave me confidence, going, wow, she's just made a job for herself out of doing something that she loves, and that's kind of amazing. The dolls used to kind of honestly freak me out, especially before they had kind of eyeballs put into their heads. But but it paid very, very little. So then I went to work in the pea factory that paid a hell of a lot more. But it paid a lot, because if you worked a night shift, a 12-hour night shift, you would get all of these kind of extra rates. And so that's what I did. I used to work, probably wasn't very healthy. I would work like 12-hour shifts, like starting at like 7 o'clock in the evening, finishing at 7 o'clock in the morning, watching conveyor belts go by with vegetables, peas, sometimes broccoli, sometimes green beans, different types of vegetables, usually green, But you couldn't do anything. You couldn't talk to people because the machinery was really loud. You had earplugs and then headphones on top of the earplugs to protect your ears. You had to look at what you were doing. So I used to just escape into my imagination and say, okay, there was once a girl, and then would, transport myself into, whatever thing I was imagining. If I messed up in the story, I would go back to the beginning and try something else. And then after a couple of years, the thing about that, it was seasonal. So it was like when the vegetables, when the season was over, you stopped, and then you would be taken back again in a couple of months. And I remember the big decision not to go back. I got the call saying, hey, it's, whatever, pea season again, and saying no. And it was really scary for me, because my self-worth was bound up with what I could earn, and what I could do and what my hands could do. And while I drew all of the time, in my spare time, that didn't have a worth, I couldn't see the worth of it. But I said no, because I kind of couldn't go back. It was kind of killing me, really. So my mum again, and my sister. My sister said, you can maybe try drawing. You're kind of old enough. I was 22, I think, turning maybe 23. I was old enough to be a mature student that didn't need, your qualifications from school in order to go to college. So my mum and my sister kind of encouraged me to apply to an art college foundation course. And so I did. My sister taught me how to do gesture drawings, because she'd studied art in school. And my mum, they just helped me to go into college. And that's from there, really, I just was led by drawing, because I suddenly was with my people, who loved drawing too. And I was with students that were like, from 17 to, people in their 60s, mature students, like they're all just loving the same kind of stuff, or, but you could see all of their drawings were very different. And I, at that point, I guess, wanted to be a fine artist, like, to paint or something. But at the time in Ireland, it wasn't so much a skills-based thing, really. It was more about finding an object, putting it into a white room that nobody was going to visit, put a big, essay on the wall beside the white object, and then, hopefully sell it to somebody who's going to, for their investment or whatever. So, but then I became aware of animation as something that you could do. Don Bluth Studios were in Dublin at the time, and so I went into animation college, and that's where I met Tom and Paul and Fabian and Jeremy, a lot of people that I still work with today. We kind of started to group together.
Wow. Just to say, this is really weird. My dad worked in a pea factory in Ireland. Isn't that funny? And he used to say that, because it was so boring, he said that the most fun they had was going into the refrigerator room and doing a fart and then running out. And it would just hover like this sort of invisible fart, and then you'd go in and go, oh, and it would hit you. But so it must be an Irish thing.
Farting?
No. Pea factories, working in pea factories. So, okay. Let's talk about your film, your beautiful My Father's Dragon. And so I think lots of people saw it this morning. What a lot of work. What an amazing film. Congratulations, it's fantastic. And and I know it was made extra fantastic because you used people in this audience, I believe.
Would you mind standing up, people in this
Yeah,
audience
go on,
who
stand
worked
up,
on the
people who
film?
worked on it.
Because these things are not possible without incredibly
Yay!
incredibly gifted artists who all, work together to make this film. And it was a difficult production. It was a huge production, the kind of biggest film in terms of budget, intensity, deadline that was kind of, immovable. That's the word, immovable, unmovable. Anyway, so I couldn't have done it without an incredible team of artists, 3 of whom are sitting in our audience today. They were incredible.
Could you talk a little bit about the process? This is me with my animator anorak on. So how did it all start? I know it was based on a book. So how did it all come about?
Yeah, so back in 2012, I was approached, or we in Cartoon Saloon, myself and Paul, were approached by Julie Lynn, who was a live-action producer who had just finished a film in Dublin called Albert Nobbs with Glenn Close. And I think it was the film, that film was premiering, I think, during the Dublin Film Festival. And Julie asked to meet us. She had seen The Secret of Kells, and she wanted to talk about this book that she had optioned from Ruth Stiles Gannett. And so on the way up, or the night before, I think I read the book. And my children were quite small at that point. I had 2 boys, 2 very young boys at that point, and I loved not just what was written in the book in terms of, this young boy called Elmer who has a fight with his mom, and he goes and frees a dragon and then kind of eventually returns back home. Not just what was written on the page, but what I felt between the lines. There was a lot of the fact that Elmer and his mom had a fight in the first place. I thought that was really interesting for a book that's aimed at young children and families. And this book, which has been, in print since 1948, it has been, it's been read by generations. There's something really special about the honesty in the book, and then the absolutely, boundless imagination in the book, and then this friendship between a boy and a dragon, which essentially I kind of saw as 2 boys, really, and having 2 boys, it kind of it really gelled for me. But that was back in 2012. Julie's a huge amount of energy, this really, again, this kind of, can-do attitude that I'm always drawn to. I'm such a negative person, somebody who always kind of thinks about, well, if I do that, then this could go wrong and that could go wrong. And so, I mean, that's what drew me to, Tom and Paul. They're so confident and positive that I kind of tag along. I just pull on their coattails, and that kind of pulls me along. And people like Julie, the same thing. She's just always really positive about things, and it kind of balances me kind of nicely. So that we said yes. And we were kind of developing it. I met Meg Lefauve, the screenwriter who first brought the project to Julie. She had read the book as a child and then had read it to her children as they were growing up. And she had a writing partner, John Morgan. And they, at that point, kind of knew that they wanted to pull the story a little bit away from where the book was, how the book was kind of formulated, still making sure that Elmer and Boris's, friendship was the center of things, but looking at more of a kind of an arc that would sustain a feature kind of length. And so, we began talking about it and we began doing some drawings. And then it was kind of a slow development. I began making the Breadwinner, actually, in the meantime. And then when I finished the Breadwinner, I went back to My Father's Dragon, and that's kind of how we started with it. As the Breadwinner was kind of finishing up, we pitched it, the story around Hollywood. And for me, even that was a bigger and a different kind of thing. Usually our feature films, which I love, The Breadwinner and Song of the Sea and Wolfwalkers, The Secret of Kells, we were usually kind of trying to elbow for room in the smallest of art house theatres, with small distributors who had huge hearts and were really trying to push our work. But for this one, we just said, what would happen if we went with a bigger, like a big studio or a streaming service, something like that could potentially get more eyeballs on the film, especially on The Breadwinner. I was really aware that in those small art house cinemas, I was reaching one type of audience, usually quite well educated, kind of with and I wanted to put a film like this, which was about two kids being scared, into more children's hands. Into the living rooms of, or even the phones of people who aren't feeling that they're being judged by the choices that in the cinema lobby or whatever kind of thing that they're making. Children, especially at that age where you are realizing that the world is bigger than you thought it was, that your parents don't have all the answers, that there are things in life that are scary and that you don't have answers for and that nobody has answers for. Because of the subject matter of the film, it kind of suited that kind of a way to go with it. So that was kind of how we got started.
And you met the author, so she's 99, is that right?
Ruth is 99.
Has she seen the film?
Ruth is, her health is deteriorating at this point. Her family she has 7 daughters who have, their own children at this point. And so we had young generation of Ruth's family watch the film. One of her daughters came to one of the screenings that we did in Virginia, where I was there with the sound designer and with Meg, our screenwriter, and so her family we've kept them up to date all the way through the process of making the film. But Ruth's health isn't the best at this point, and so and her own memories of Elmer and Boris would be very particular to the book. But when I met Ruth back in a number of years ago now, I went to upstate New York to her gorgeous yellow house that she had spent decades with her husband Peter and her 7 daughters. She had raised her 7 daughters in that house, and I got a huge sense of who she is. She made bread. We had soup that our daughter made, and we ate blueberry pie that from blueberries from our garden, and I got a massive sense again of the importance that Ruth places on imagination. She wrote this book. When I asked her why did you who did you write the book for, and she said just herself. She didn't start writing thinking that, okay, children are going to read this, so how am I going to pitch this towards children or anything like that. She literally wrote this book for herself. And it was, it must have been an amazing experience for her, because she was in her mid-20s when she wrote the book, became incredibly successful. She went on to become a mom and, to become part of the community in Trumansburg, in the village where she lives. But for that book to be such a defining thing, of her life, I was just trying to imagine what that must be like for her. But she was a very generous person, very strong, very, you know, with a huge voice. And I got a sense even from her daughters of what it would, you know, be like to be raised by Ruth Giles Gannett. She's an incredible woman.
Lovely. And okay, going back to the technical stuff for the film, the thought of making a feature film just fills me with horror. I just wouldn't know where to start, you know. So how do you make a feature film? I mean, how do you... So, okay, you start and you've got your book, and then you have to do the screenplay first, is it? Or
Yeah.
drawings, or...
And it depends, I think, on the project. The process for The Breadwinner was quite different from the process for My Father's Dragon, and the process for Wolfwalkers or A Song of the Sea or even The Secret of Kells, they were all quite different. And they all each had their own kind of strengths and weaknesses, their own opportunities, their own teams even. You know, it's funny because on my way here, I was talking to Chris, who's a head of layout in a studio, and even what that means in that studio is different to what it means in Cartoon Saloon. And what it means in Cartoon Saloon might be different on a different project where you have a different set of people with a different set of strengths and weaknesses and how they work together. So even what a director is different, you know, kind of thing. So some directors are editors who mightn't draw at all, and they have a great sense of story, and they're able to lead a team in a certain way, and they're able to rely on the strengths of, you know, their head of animation or their character designer or something like that. So it's different for different projects. With my line producer on My Father's Dragon, because it was the biggest thing probably that I'd ever worked on, and the most intense and the most difficult because we'd made it during COVID, and because I'd never worked with such a big team all at once without ever actually meeting a lot of people, you know, as well. That had its own difficulty. So with Zara, our line producer, I said, just lead me around the next bend, and then I'll see where I am there, and then just lead me around the next one. You know, there's in Irish, the word for road is bóthair. So bó is a cow. And I used a lot of the roads in Ireland are very twisty, you know, I suppose as they are here in Wales, are the old roads. And so the reason, apparently, I don't know whether it's true or not, that they are all twisty is that if you're leading a cow down a road that looks like it's a straight road and it's like 2 miles long, the cow will say, no, I'm not going to do that. But if you just make all of these bends and the cow thinks, okay, just around the next bend, maybe this is the last bend. No, there's another one. Okay, I'll just go around this one. And directing is a little bit like that too. I think you have to fall in love with your characters. I'm sure it's the same. I can see everything that you do, Joanna, and watching your career and watching your interests and your skills, you know, change and grow. How you deal with humanity, flesh, how you deal with, mortality, and spirit, like the massive spirit that you have in your characters that just bursts off the screen. I think certainly myself as a director, if I could have like one little thimble full of that, I'd be doing okay. But I can see that you're pushed with a passion for your characters and a love for your characters, but not a love that kind of sees no evil, right? You see everything in like the best version of a God kind of like way, you know, that you like a God who can see your flaws and love you for your flaws. That's how you see. This is my reading of what you're doing, or certainly what I feel when I look at your work. That's what I see. That you're led by the passion and love for your characters, and I think that's can sustain, because you know your projects, they're not features, but they're a huge amount of work, and because of the teams that you build, I can see even your relationship with your team. That it's a loving one and a supportive one. Like that's as much work because you're dealing with smaller teams and you're dealing, you know, you're holding on to a lot more. I know you touch every page, so that's a huge amount of work. I think it's probably about the same amount of work, honestly, as directing a feature, where more of your skill, when you're on a feature that is this size that you couldn't possibly touch every page, and you can't talk to every person, because not only are you you rely on, you as a director, on a massive like film like My Father's Dragon, or massive for me anyway, I guess it's not massive in terms of like Hollywood, but you have your heads of your departments. But if you overstep your heads of departments and go to like directly to an animator and say, oh, I'm not sure I liked what you did on that scene, or I really liked what you did on that scene, you have to say that stuff to your heads of department. Otherwise you take the power from them, or you, not the power, like the gosh, you're taking your hand from their shoulder and you're moving around them, I guess. So you have to work with the structure that you have. Otherwise, it'll all fall apart. It's like
I suppose, I mean, the thing that I think we all know is like how important systems are, you know, in animation. And you have to go in one direction, and you can't sort of go step sideways and go back. You know, you have to stick to the system, or else it does go squiffy. And so that's what you're talking about, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. No, this is it. You have to, and again, even your line producer, your production manager, you know, your technical director, like everybody who's relying on you to impart a certain amount of information at certain, times, and insert, you know, that you have to do that. Otherwise, you won't get there. You'll run out of money and you'll run out of time. And because I'm a studio owner, I know, and I've had the pain over the 20 years of going, I don't know if we can make it till the end of the month. And I don't know, so like those are really big concerns all of the time. Like a part of my head is producer and part of my head is director, all of the time. So I'm never reaching for like what's the most amazing thing that we could possibly do. And I'm always aware that you can burn out your team. If you're looking for a perfection that doesn't really exist or whatever, you can burn out your team. You can throw focus on something that ultimately doesn't really matter. Say, for example, a hand on the side of the screen is growing and shrinking a little bit because somebody didn't pay a huge amount of attention to that because there's a face in the center of the screen. I don't really care about that hand in the side of the screen, because I think if anybody's looking at that, we've lost them anyway. They're not paying attention to the story. I was reminded earlier, we were talking about Caroline Leaf. She's an amazing independent filmmaker. And she, when she's making her films, if she makes what could be considered as a mistake, she just weaves it into the whole process, and it's part of the film that she makes, because, again, it's expressing something extremely human. And what do we look for in our stories? We look for humanity, to know that somebody got through something tough before. It doesn't matter whether you're doing with a comedy or love story or whatever. There is a conflict, and conflict is when we're trying to make our path through life, on that windy road. That's what we're all looking for in stories, to know that we're not alone. Somebody felt like this before. Our secret selves are not that secret, because it's something that we all share. That's what we're looking for in story. But that's how to make it. You surround yourself by a lot of people that know how to make it, because all directors have different skill sets, as I said. So you're not afraid to ask questions. You try and encourage other people to not be afraid to ask questions, and then you solve problems together. The worst thing a director can do is say, I know everything, and don't ask me, or I'm going to judge you if you ask me something. That you have to be really open and encourage that kind of openness. You have a love and a passion for your characters, but you need to be able to communicate that to others, or else you can spend 60 years making one film, I guess, and yeah.
So what do you enjoy doing most in the whole process when you're making a film?
I enjoy every step as I'm doing it, I have to say. And I'm looking forward to the next one, going, the next one's going to be the easy bit. So I finished the voice recording because that's really intense, and I'm working with actors who I might feel intimidated by because I've seen their pictures in magazines or whatever. But the next bit's going to be easy, because then I just get to edit the voices, and that's going to be the easy bit.
You're just thinking like that cow.
Yeah,
going around corners. What could be easy?
Absolutely, yeah. On the boher. I absolutely think that way. I do love every process. I've always tried to in my work, like even before I worked in Cartoon Saloon, I worked in Brown Bag Studios in Dublin, and I would it was quite small at the time. There was only 15 people working there. It was back in the mid 90s. But I would ask other people, how do you do your job? What does your job entail? Because I wanted to be able to do mine better. So if I was animating a scene and I was making a timing chart, and somebody was going to have to scan those drawings, and I wanted to know if there was a way that I could do what I was doing better, so that they didn't get confused about like all of the layers of on the scenes that I was doing. And so when I started working in Cartoon Saloon, because we'd have to budget what we were doing, we'd have to schedule what we were doing at the same time as maybe do the drawings or whatever, and buy the toilet paper for the toilets, and all of this kind of stuff. It gave me an awareness of what everybody was doing. I forget your question. What was it? I was thinking about toilet paper. Sorry.
I'll ask another one. So after the success of The Secret of Kells and nominated for an Oscar, as a small studio, because you were still quite small then, presumably, what happened? What changed? Did lots of doors open for you?
Oh, gosh. I think, yes, they did. They did indeed, but we were already, we were a group of artists who kind of got together to make stuff together, but we weren't, nobody had a degree in business or anything like that, and we were really, sometimes with the projects that we were doing, we would, by the time we even start them, we would have kind of agreed to things in contracts that would mean that we could never really benefit from the work that we were doing. So that was a huge learning curve for us. And we had help from Screen Ireland and Enterprise Ireland, like different organisations that tried to help us make better decisions for our company. But ultimately, nobody could make our mistakes for us except ourselves. So The Secret of Kells, we had gone... During the production of The Secret of Kells, we had gone from something like 15 people to 77. Not only were we doing The Secret of Kells, we did a TV series called Skunk Fu at the same time, which was done in Flash. So we had no development department, right, when we were doing the Secret of Kells, because we had these two huge projects going at the same time. So I hadn't initially, I had made some short films before The Secret of Kells, and I was looking at it from more like a producer kind of perspective of like trying to help get the project made. I didn't think about being a co-director on it, but Tom asked me to come on because of the experience I had on the short films, and so it was all hands on deck to try and keep the company together as we made those two productions. And because The Secret of Kells was a co-production, it was done on paper. We were co-producing with France and with Belgium. We were shipping paper to Brazil, where there was a cleanup studio, and then eventually to Hungary. And it was really seat of the pants stuff. We weren't sure what was going to happen the next day, kind of thing. Could we hold it together for long enough, So when the Oscar nomination came out, we had thought that it was pretty much... we were so naive. We thought, that the film... if it was really good, we could get it into 2,000, screens in every country or whatever, and it was going to be like amazing. But that's not the way, it works. If you're lucky enough to get a distributor, then they have to convince the exhibitors, to show a film from a studio that nobody's ever heard of in a style that nobody, is used to. So. So when that nomination came out, we were thinking, gosh, like, what are we going to do? Are we going to like even make more stuff, Because we were keeping the company together by doing commercials in the meantime, but we weren't even in a big enough city to really, make enough from the commercials to kind of keep the company together. So we were in this kind of horrendous cycle of growing and shrinking and growing and shrinking. And so, it did open a lot of doors. Tom had been blogging through the whole making of The Secret of Kells, and I think that's actually what made a big difference. in terms of getting eyeballs onto what we were doing. So I think a lot of people that were working in Pixar and working in studios around the world on their lunch breaks would kind of say, oh, what, like, you know, let's have a look at this blog. Where he would, you know, and we were really transparent with things like, you know, we put up concept art, put up, you know, any animation tests that we were doing along the way. Like if we had an argument in a meeting, he'd say, "Oh, it's a tough day today," and he'd write it on the blog. And it was funny because when we, you know, when a distributor would become involved then with the film, they say, "Okay, now take down the blog." And Tom said, "No, I'm not going to take it down. It's like, you know, it's my blog. I'm going to keep it up there." And he was right. You know, he was dealing with a kind of new medium, the era of social media that was coming in, and the power of sharing that people weren't really used to. So yeah, it did open a lot of doors. We funded A Song of the Sea similarly to how we funded Kells. Again, it was a co-production this time between 5 countries. Which again had its own issues, but its own, you know, we at that point we're learning, okay, you know, you co-produce with people who have complementary skills to you. You co-produce with people that you really know, because it's like marriages, you know, you really need to know who you're getting married to.
So do you find then that as time goes on and you're working with people that you tend to work with the same people each time, or that you'd like to work with the same people because you have a relationship with them and they're easy and you know what they can do?
Yeah, in terms of co-production partners, and that we do like to work, you know, hopefully with the same people again, and the same, you know, with distributors and that, because, gosh, you're all part of the same ecosystem, you know, and again, you know, the cycle of, you know, films, there are kind of booms and busts, you know, where we're looking now at, you know, a couple of years ago, say when My Father's Dragon was funded, people were throwing cash at everything, you know, kind of thing. Whereas now it's kind of closed down a little bit again, and you know, you can see the beginnings of it opening up again. So yeah, you do try and work with the same people. It's hard to give consistency in animation, and sometimes the more stable jobs can be in administration. If you're going to work in the office of an animation company, your job paradoxically is far more stable than an animator who might have like 20 years experience, might be at a time in their life where they're going, okay, I need to, you know, settle down. I'd really like to buy a house. I'd really like to start a family. Those jobs can be quite transient. So in Cartoon Saloon, what we did a number of years ago was tried to help set up another studio in Kilkenny so that we could give some kind of stability to people who wanted to stay. And then, you know, even the last couple of years have shown as well that, you know, you can be based somewhere and work as part of a team, but not, you know, not be in the same city maybe or the same country as the studio. We're still working out a lot of that stuff. Like in Cartoon Saloon, a lot of the funding for our features comes from a tax break called Section 481, which means that you can raise more than 30% of your budget for your feature just by having people living in Ireland, you know, which is it's great for the country. But again, you're asking people, hey, can you know, leave your house in Germany for maybe 8 months and come and, you know, work in Ireland, which, you know, you can't ask people if they're at a certain point in their career and they have a family that might be, you know, in school and whatever. So there are pros and cons to working this way. The international co-production model, though, means that we can make films that are a little bit braver, that aren't directed by committee, you know, that aren't, you know, no one person holds the purse strings, so therefore no one person gets that kind of creative say besides the director as to, you know, so they're not led by fear. That you know, that they can be sometimes led by fear when you're looking with one funder.
So how is it working with Netflix? What are they like? Are they hands-on, or do they let you get on with it?
Well, it's like I can't imagine that we could have made this film, like if this was our usual co-production where like every single penny, you know, is really scrounged together to make the feature. I don't think we'd have been able to get through the pandemic situation where we literally over a weekend had to say to everyone, okay, go and work from home, work from your bedroom or your you know, the corner of your kitchen table. Netflix were able to kind of support us in ways that meant that that we were able to support the new situation that we had during the pandemic. It meant that if we needed to hire some new animators, from halfway across the world, that we were able to do that. And so we were able to get it finished. I don't think I've ever worked so hard as I did on My Father's Dragon, and I don't think we'd have been able to do that without the support of Netflix. So yeah, it was a different experience, very different from our usual kind of co-production.
But what about creatively? Did they step in and
advise
you and want to have a say?
Oh, no, absolutely, yeah. But I mean, again, we were even dealing with working with Julie and Bonnie and Meg. That was different to what I was used to. Like on The Breadwinner, I worked with a Canadian, writer and a Canadian co-producers. And our co-producers in Luxembourg, who we were very used to working with on all our feature films, and so yeah, it was quite different to work on a film. But even the film that was set in America was a very different thing for us. And I guess even The Breadwinner had its very unique cultural identity. It was set in Afghanistan. It was a very particular and sensitive story, and so yeah, My Father's Dragon was different in many ways for us, and so yeah, it was a completely different experience. And making a film for a kind of even I suppose that kind of included a younger audience again was something that was quite different for me. Yeah.
Yeah, going on to The Breadwinner, what an amazing film! That's a fantastic film. Maybe we should show a little clip of The Breadwinner, which was made in 2017, about a young girl who lived in Kabul, and her father was sent to prison, and because of living under the Taliban, she became the only breadwinner, but had to dress up as a boy because girls weren't allowed to work, and when in 21, when it all went upside down and the Taliban took over again, I was thinking about you and this film and thinking, oh my goodness, how are you feeling? When were you watching it, thinking, oh my God?
Yeah, I mean, it's a horrendous nightmare when you think of. Not even just from a human rights perspective, but look at the resources that are being in terms of young women, their ingenuity, the everything that they're capable of doing, to even deny a country all of that resource. If you don't even look at the human rights kind of aspect of it, that's just absolutely horrendously tragic, And yeah, so I to go from the millions of women that were being and it was not a perfect system by any stretch. Afghanistan, there's a huge amount of corruption there, and there was not. But just seeing what has happened now. And seeing even the brain drain, it's just such a step backwards. Yeah. And
could we maybe see the clip?
When I was young, Parwana, I knew what peace felt like. Stories remain in our hearts even when all else is gone.
My family is in a desperate situation.
Girl, stop when I tell you!
I'm going to find Boba.
No, you're not.
I'm going! There's nothing you can do to stop me.
Maybe if we think of it like a story, huh?
Is it a happy story or a sad story?
Just wait and see.
So, I mean, this might be a really stupid question, but I don't know. Do you know if it was seen in Afghanistan?
Yeah, it was broadcast. It was dubbed into Pashto and Dari, the two official languages of Afghanistan, and it was shown on TV there because again, cinema culture wasn't such a thing, but also women going to cinemas wasn't even before the most recent events. And I've met a lot of Afghan women in particular who think of it as their film. I've met young Afghan animators and illustrators who, again, talking about brain drain. I met somebody who had been setting up an animation school in Kabul.
Is that
back
Sarah?
Yes, Sarah. Yeah, and she had to leave, and this is before again the most recent events. Animation itself is such a powerful medium in what it can express and how it can express it, and how you can layer storytelling and how you can give voice and throw focus and throw light onto experiences and situations. And the making of this film itself and the stories that went into the kind of that got layered into the film itself are something that I'm really, really proud of. When we did a cast and crew screening in Toronto, one of our cast, her father, had taken his family out, decades before, had managed to take his family out of Afghanistan and create a new life for them in Canada. And he hadn't really spoken about, things that he had experienced until watching that film with his daughter. And he began speaking in Dari to his family and some of the cast about things that he hadn't kind of ever spoke about. And it really brought it home to me, just about how film, but I think animation in particular, it can just scratch the surface of stories in a way, which again, bringing it back to, someone else has been through this and someone else has survived this, or someone else has marked this in some way. And there's something about that. I remember at times with the breadwinner, when we were crafting the animatic, people saying, yeah, but like, what does she get at the end? She needs to, we need to have something tangible at the end of this film. And it just didn't make any sense for this film, for Parvana to be able to look into her father's eyes. That was enough for me. That was, and enough for anyone who had a sense of what that film was about. That was enough. And so, yeah, I did. But what I love about animation is that teamwork kind of thing, right? So you might be working with a load of people, and some of them you mightn't get to meet at all, kind of thing when working on the film. But the fact that they can all get it and they can all bring their own skills to the film that you're making together, that's a very hopeful thing. The fact that you can get hundreds of people working on one thing, and it all slots together in a way that can be an emotional experience for somebody else, for somebody sitting in an audience who makes it their own, who fills in that last piece. That's extremely hopeful, and to be any kind of a part of that is wonderful. And to be part of that once is enough, and to get to do it a couple of times is an absolute privilege.
And Angelina Jolie, then, what's she like?
Very beautiful. I must have wobbly times.
Even in real life?
Yes. Yes, yes, they're actors for a good reason. But she is a very intelligent person and a good listener. I think in that she actually reminds me of somebody who's like a really good diplomat or something like that. When when I met her at the beginning of this whole process, and again, I was thinking, my gosh, she'd be a great person to shine a light on this project. But I was again that intimidated feeling that you have sometimes with actors or people who were in the public eye. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, who is she? But she was incredibly just supportive. She never, as an executive producer, she never kind of enforced you should do this, or you must do this. She was really just guiding the project in and kind of allowing, or bringing things to the table that we could use without being really forceful. That's something that's rare, and especially in filmmaking. I think she'd been through enough experiences herself as a director, as a writer, as an actor, where she knew what would be really useful. And so you can step all over something and kind of like plonk your name on it, or you can be really supportive. And that's what she was, which is really incredible. When I saw, a lot of our cast are, some are Afghans, some are from the Middle East, some are, we a lot of people who were, in their own words, were used to getting cast as like terrorist number 3. And so for her even to come in the red carpet and stand with our cast was a big deal, And so she knows. Yeah, she's an incredibly intelligent person, I think, but emotionally intelligent as well as,
So when you work with actors and you're doing the voice do you do the voice direction? Yeah. So how do you do it? Do you act it out in front of them and say, this is the emphasis that I want you to do? Or, presumably they do it to picture, maybe, or some sort of animatic. But are you very specific about what you want, or do you allow them to do what they want? Or does it depend on the actor?
It depends on the actor and the age of the actor. I'm working with very young children, so I've worked with 3-year-olds. So I've done things like had a hand puppet, and that would be the voice director is the hand puppet who's just strategically behind the microphone. And so everything from that. But even in that situation, I'll try not to lead the actor in terms of like, oh, do it this way or with this kind of intonation. I'll try and play in a way that because if you get something really natural, even from a young actor, if it's not exactly what's on the page or whatever, then that's far more charming and more real than if they say the exact words, And so everything from that to, again, the likes of, Whoopi Goldberg or Rita Moreno, don't do the puppet with them. But and they're all very unique and very different. So I'll try and flow like water. I'll try and be what they would like me to be in order to be really comfortable in that space. So some actors will allow you in behind the glass with them and allow you to read opposite them. Other actors want their own space to themselves. So I'll do whatever they want me to do in order to for them to be really comfortable and to feel safe in that space, in that very creative space. With a lot of actors, that is reading opposite them. So I generally don't. Well, you generally, if you're dealing with a big cast, you're not going to be able to get them all in the same room together. It also really wrecks my head if I'm trying to imagine an ensemble cast where I'm thinking, okay, take one was good for this actor, but not good for that actor. And, so I can't really manage that thing. And so I'd read opposite an actor in a way that brings what I would imagine like the energy, be it something very quiet and intimate or something huge. I'll bring that while reading opposite them, and then that kind of helps them understand, whether because at that point, yes, we will have the animatic. I don't tend not to show it to them because I think you have to kind of work in animation really to understand even the rough drawings of an animatic. But I know at that point more or less like whether we have an intimate like close up or something that's a mid shots, and so or if the actor is running or whatever. So I'll do that stuff opposite them while reading the other parts. Even if we have those parts recorded at that point, I'll kind of mimic what has been recorded for the other parts, and so kind of build a tapestry that way. And then I go back to animatic again, and if they've done if they've improvised in ways that I need to change shots, I will change shots at that point.
Do you ever have that thing that I always have, where the actors who maybe aren't used to working in animation tend to be a bit slow and deliberate, and so you're there going, yeah, that was really good, but could you do it twice as fast, please? You know, because you're thinking of how many drawings you've got to do. And especially if you're not looking at them and you listen rather than look at them, you realise it's a bit flat, and you have to go, no, more animated, more faster, and more up and down.
For sure. I remember on The Secret of Kells, I'd made 2 short films, but neither of them had dialogue in them because I was afraid of recording dialogue because I had no idea what to do. And then I was at, the Secret of Kells recordings, and we had Brendan Gleeson and Mick Lally, and I was going, oh no. And I don't even know, how many takes is normal? What should I, but it became clear after about an hour working that they just want you to help them do their best work. So if that includes saying, that's not going to work, or that's not right, or whatever, or they need to explore it more, they're really happy for you to do that, because they don't want to sit there in 2 years' time and hear their voice in a way that's not quite right, kind of thing, for what they were doing. So, and you're right, especially the inexperienced ones they might have cans on, and so they're feeling really self-conscious. They're not feeling the right energy for whatever it is that they're doing, and you need to help them get there in whatever way you do that. And again, all directors, I guess, are individuals, and certainly all actors are very individual. But yeah, I mean, it's normal to go, 5 or more takes, and even if you're really happy with take 1, you need to try different ways to make sure that you have, because that's very expensive time. Having an actor in a sound studio with a sound engineer is a really expensive time. And also you can't go to an animator and say, the actor really wasn't feeling it that day. And the best take, I don't really believe it, but can you spend a week animating this kind of thing? They're going to go, no, I don't, I can't bring something that's not there. They can plus it, and they can be, full of passion for something, if it's there. But if it's not there, you can have the best animator in the world and they can't make it right.
Do you encourage actors to ad-lib or stick to the script?
Both. I ask them to first stick to the script and then ad-lib. Yeah, and especially with children, what can happen is if you take the pages away and just say, just give me the spirit of what was being said, it can be far more wonderful than if they're actually looking at the lines. Yeah, you can. Yeah, and you can have both. You see, this is the thing. Even if they ad lib, it's only, you were talking probably only a couple of minutes if you're talking about a line. So damn it, get it. I remember I won't say it, but there's an Irish actor who doesn't get a lot of work, even though they should get a lot of work because they're amazing. And I know why they don't, because I know that they were in a recording situation at one point with a director where they did one take, and the director said, okay, can we go again, and can we try it this way? And they said, well, what's wrong with what I did? And they said, nothing. And they said, well, why do you want me to do it again? And they said, well, just for safety. They said, that's a sound engineer's job. I don't do safety. And that was it. And so, when you think of I've seen actors who are, in advanced years who you think, gosh, I don't want to spend all their energy, but they're, they want to do their best work. And we're all just trying to do our best work, and there's no point in trying to do anything else. Doing that and knowing when to stop as a director when you're pushing, a scene, and you're pushing it too much, and you know that animator has to go on the next week to do something else that might be the emotional climax of the entire film. Knowing when to stop there is a different matter to knowing when to stop in, I think, a recording kind of setup. There are things that you do, like, a lot of actors will want to, if you got shouty stuff, they want to do that last because it literally shreds their vocal cords, and they can't go from big shouty stuff to, very intimate stuff because it sounds like they got 3 voices, But it depends on the actor. I tried to do that with Ian McShane. I said, okay, let's leave the shouty stuff to last. And he goes, no, let's just go through it chronologically. So, you can't, you just have to ask. how do you want to work?
One question then is the fact that you're a woman, you're a mum. How do you balance work and family time? Easily, or is it a conundrum?
I think, and I don't know, but I think like being a parent at all, you're going to have guilt, right? You're going to say, I don't spend enough time with my children, or I don't spend enough time with my crew, I don't spend enough time in the pub, I don't spend enough time, doing homework, or so either which way you look, there's going to be guilt when you're a parent. I always thought I would have children when I had enough money, to kind of, provide something kind of, stable for them. When I had my first, when I was pregnant, about 6 months pregnant with my first child, not only did I have to plough all of my savings back into the company, but I had to get out a loan that would be kind of like minus 30 grand or something like that. So it was like, okay, well, there goes that, but we got through it, and my children had enough to eat, and we had roofs over our head when we needed them and that. So you can never have the perfect set of circumstances. There did come a time, I met my husband in college. He went to animation college. He worked on my first short film. He was the art director and storyboarder. He worked in Cartoon Saloon for a bit, and then he practiced his own art, and worked with people from disadvantaged backgrounds and with learning challenges and that. But there came a time where our kids were quite small, and we kind of thought, oh gosh, it was hard to afford, people to look after our kids, and then also the thing of I'll kiss their snotty faces, or he'll kiss their snotty faces, but somebody who, somebody's working in a nursery isn't going to do that. So he stopped working initially for what we thought was going to be like a year or two while our kids were quite small. And now, 12 years later, he's just about getting back into his own artwork, and our kids are, in their teens now. So he was a primary carer for our children for most of their growing up years. But it was really funny because if something happened in school, I was still the one who would get the text messages, and I'd have to forward the text message to Michael, because, it's a lonely thing being a dad, and looking after your kids, because there aren't the, mother and baby groups and all this kind of stuff. There aren't the same kind of setups. So we were kind of both, blazing trails, I guess. How is it? I don't know. I think it informs the work. In Cartoon Saloon, recently enough, we had to do an incentivizing thing, because Jerry Sharon, our managing director, kind of pointed out, hey, there have been no babies born in Cartoon Saloon for, I can't remember, there was nearly a decade or something like that. So we had to do a thing where Catherine Roycraft, this amazing person who works with us and runs the studio, did a whole thing with if you have a baby and, you can come back to work after 6 months or 9 months, or we can figure things out, because we don't want to miss out on working with people who have lots of different life experiences. And whether you're looking after a kid or looking after an elderly parent or whatever, our stories are better when you have people who are just trying to go through whatever, life's challenges, rather than, eternally working with people who are at a particular point in their career, because that changes the types of stories that we're making. And so, when my kids were young, we tried to do a thing where we just have them around, my husband would bring my baby in, and I'd feed my baby in an open plan studio. And so that was fine for the people that were working there at that particular time, but 2 years later, nobody remembers that stuff. So we're just kind of continually trying to keep things open in a way that go the best stories are told by human beings who have, imperfect lives and have struggles, and, things aren't going well sometimes, and other times things are going well. And, like I said, you're racked with guilt either way, I think, but you're also just trying to do the best you can. And I'm kind of really happy that I managed to be part of a supportive environment that allows people to be imperfect.
Yay. Great. So shall we, thank you, Nora. Should we open it up to the audience now then?
I was just interested when you were saying now about different people having different kinds of stories. I'm just wondering how that impacts on your story process. You know, when you're going from your initial drawings through to early storyboards and into animatics. You know, what's your process within the studio for that?
So it kind of depends on the project. With My Father's Dragon, for example, Meg and John kind of, like I was saying earlier, kind of already knew that they were going to look for a particular type of arc for, you know, Elmer and Boris's story, and because there was literally, you know, the Atlantic Ocean between myself and Meg, and different time zones, and that we had a kind of particular working relationship where she brought the script at a point where we thought it was, all scripts, I think you have to go into animatic phase thinking, okay, this is it. I can't imagine what we could particularly change with this. It seems, perfect. But no matter what, as you start to draw, you'll realize certain things, you know, too much stuff is being said and not enough is being shown, or the pacing is off at a particular time. It gets really flabby in the middle of the feature, whatever. So even before you finish that first pass of storyboarding, you know that you're going to have to rewrite some pages. And so you do that. You screen your animatic. You screen it for as much of the crew as is there. You screen it for, you know, your funder, if you're one funder, or people that you trust in terms of like good story people who are able to give good notes, and you'll get a massive load of notes back. Like you'll be drowning in notes, but only the ones that really make you toss and turn at night, or the ones that you keep getting. You know, lots of people will have different solutions for things, and you don't have to listen to solutions, but you do have to listen. If a lot of people say, I got really bored in the middle of this, or I didn't know what the character wanted at the beginning, or I got confused at this point, you have to listen to those notes, because if they're feeling it at that point, and your animatic with your rough drawings are, you know, it's the most raw form of your film, but it is your film, right? If people don't have an emotional response to that animatic, they're not going to have it to the final film when it's all in colour. And, you know, you've had brilliant animators work on it, and some amazing composer has done an incredible score. If they don't have a reaction at that first animatic, you've got work to do. And so you'll do, like on a feature, you'll do several passes. You could do 4, 5, 6, 7. You know, I think on My Father's Dragon, I think we did 9 passes of the animatic. And so just trying to hone it, earn the animation. That's what we're trying to do all the way through. So there will be rewriting through that process. So with Meg came over at a certain point, and she was writing pages as we were kind of fixing animatic. I'm a very hands-on editor type. So instead of like sitting in a sofa behind my editor, I will we will pass the whole project back and forth. Before we get our actors to record, I'll do a pass either with like just people in the studio who just doing voices of different characters, or if I'm in a rush, I'll do it all myself, kind of thing, just so that I can pace the thing. Or if I'm trying to change lines, because again, if I get a load of notes that somebody's really confused, or people are really confused at a certain point, and I need to change things on the fly, So it's really, you're pushing and pulling and molding. Sometimes you can really tell if people who aren't that used to using animation for what animation is really good for, big imaginative, visual stories. They just illustrate a script, and you can feel it, you can see it, you can see how it's not really using the medium for what it's best for, I think.
What is your process for character design? Like, how do you approach? Because I've noticed, but like with all the films that you've made, that the studio has made, there's a clear sort of, there's a running design, I think, with the characters that, like, it's sort of, I wouldn't know how to describe it, but I can kind of see it. So when you're designing a character, what is your kind of thought process with it?
Yeah, there is, I guess, an aesthetic. Now, I do think that, like, the character design from My Father's Dragon is very different from Wolfwalkers, I would say, you know, kind of thing. There are kind of, very different, but I don't know, but you might notice it as the same studio. But, gosh, I'll tell you what happened with, I guess, The Secret of Kells initially. When we made a proof of concept trailer for The Secret of Kells, when we were first a group of students who just got together, moved down to Kilkenny and started making this thing. And if you can see it online, it's called Rebel. It was before it was called The Secret of Kells. And you can see all the different animators' hands on that. And you can see how everybody was drawing it very differently, because we didn't really even have the kind of discipline to say, okay, in order for the character to walk out of one scene and into another, and this, you've got two different animators handling the characters, we need to have the eyes the same, you know, the same distance apart or whatever. It was kind of before we really got our stuff together to be able to kind of do that. Our co-producer, Didier Brunet, we were at the time still kind of designing the characters, and they were a bit kind of influenced by Disney and a bit influenced by Don Bluth, and you know, they weren't really our own yet. Didier said, okay, you're going to have to make this for a small amount of money, right? And what you can bring to this, you're good drawers, you can bring a design sensibility that will make this film look good, no matter whether we have an animator who is world-class brilliant or an animator who's just starting out. We need to make our film something that's going to withstand what an animator can do, be they brilliant or, you know, inexperienced. And so we knew that we could design it in a way that looked unique. We very much went and looked at the Book of Kells, that gorgeous manuscript that's a medieval manuscript in the that's housed in Trinity College. We took our influence from that and from kind of the Irish culture to give that film its own unique kind of look. And then didn't matter whether we were shipping, you know, paper halfway across the world, or to Hungary, where they have even a different understanding of animation, a different training than we do in the West. That it could withstand that. There is also a thing where I guess we have a similar sensibility in the studio now, and even the people who are attracted to come and work for the studio, to kind of share something like that. We do bring on, you know, we try and bring on different designers for different projects. Rosa Ballester-Cavo, who worked on My Father's Dragon as the main production designer, has a particular style. We do look for economy, though. You know, I think that's it, like economy, in that, like, how can you express a character in the fewest amount of lines, because each line costs when you're, you know, animating by hand. We look for that, and then looking for an overall aesthetic, right? So how do the character designers fit into the overall compositions, and trying to, you know, make sure that we are using that visual language as economically as possible, but as you know, giving as much strength to that as possible. Like, we try not to be kind of wishy-washy with our design, and try and push our personality like through the screen in ways that, like, I think Joanna does absolutely as well. You can always tell that your films are your films because of, you know, the way that they're just the expression of your hand, and when, you know, your team come, you know, and help you do that, it's always that with you're all running in the one direction.
Hello. So I'm an aspiring storyboard revisionist, like storyboard artist and revisionist, and I was wondering, if I try to apply to any of you, what would you like to see in a portfolio? Like, what do you think is important? Because I know that being a storyboard, like getting into storyboarding, is really hard. So I want to know what I should focus on to make it more impressive. And what do you specifically like think is the most important aspect to focus on?
For a storyboard artist, well, I mean, drawing and breaking down, you know, if you have, thinking about Giovanna Ferrari, who's had a story on My Father's Dragon, the advice that she gives a lot is that if you're, yourself as a storyboard artist, in order to hone your skills and to show that you are able to understand what it is about films that you love that work well. What she would have done when she was a student would be, she would look at, say, if she loves a particular film, David Lean, Great Expectations, for example, right? She would look at it, she would break down, she would draw each individual shot in that and see what the visual language was. She'd take maybe a sequence from the beginning of the film, the middle of the film, the end of the film, and break down what was his thought process through that, how he used the camera differently, maybe at the beginning, then the middle, and the end. And begin to understand. So as a storyboarder, you're not looking at your own individual sequences. You're looking at a piece of work, the entire piece of work. You're looking at how your work fits with somebody who's working at the end of the film. You're looking at so you're reading the script as a whole. And then as a storyboard artist, what you're bringing is, okay, I think that if we use these kind of shots, you're working with a head of story to say that if we use these kind of shots to express, this particular feeling with this character, then how does that affect how we use the shots at the end of the film? So you're using your camera as a very expressive storytelling tool. Storyboard artists, will be grouped together quite a bit to problem solve. So when we realize that there's a big hole in the middle of the script, the storyboarders will be brought together and then they will problem solve together. So you don't hold back ideas, in a situation like that. What I realized early in my career was that I was trying to keep okay, that's a really good idea. I'm going to keep that from my short film. But if I'm working on The Secret of Kells, I'm not going to bring up that idea because I'm going to keep that one for something else that I want to do, right? I realized that that's how you kill your own creativity. If you have a good idea about something, and maybe it's from your own sketchbook that you were thinking of, you use it. You use it in whatever your piece of work for, even if that's for a different company or something like that. You use it there and then you'll get another great idea, probably one that's better than the one that you were holding. But if you try and hold on to your creativity and not share it and push it out there, it dies because you're not. Creativity is meant to be generous and meant to be shared. Usually, what will happen with that idea is you'll go, "Oh, that's my brilliant idea." I'll push it out there and say, "Hey, what if?" The abbot is looking out the window and he does this thing, right? And somebody'll problem solve that for you, and say, well, yeah, he could do that. But then later on, if we want to use that same setup for a different set of emotions for the abbot, that's not going to work. And then you realize that thing that you were hoarding in your own sketchbook or whatever, it needs it needs to be honed anyway, I guess. So to bring it back to what would we like to see? Just loads and loads of drawings. We like to see that you're progressing. We'd like to see your learning curve. We'd like to see how you break down shots, how you break down sequences, how you look at the work of others, and how you understand it. And kind of a bit of variety as well, because in your career you're going to be doing everything from storyboarding, maybe for live action, for 3D, for action, for and maybe short films and things like that. So your adaptability is something, and your ability to work as part of a team is something that we'd like to see.
One question popped up during this good discussion. You said you have several storyboards at your studio, but I also heard also studios just only use one storyboarder and one story revisionist. So I was wondering, is your studio an exception, or is it the one who use only one storyboarder? Those are much rarer.
You're asking, is it one storyboarder? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, a lot of studio only use one storyboarder.
Oh, yeah.
And you mentioned you have several storyboarders, so I was wondering, is it a common thing or not?
Oh, So no, we would rarely be one storyboarder unless you're talking about a short film. On The Breadwinner, for the first pass of the animatic, I worked with one storyboarder, Julien Renard, because the amount of research, the amount of communication and that, and the sensitivity of that story, I knew I couldn't really deal with a team of 6 people, each with their own ideologies and all of that kind of stuff. I needed to just work really sensitively with one person. So we weren't at that point though. We weren't worried about what kind of shots we were going to use. We weren't even worried about location design or even character design, anything like that. We were just trying to get the story right. And so for that first pass, that's why I worked with one person, and then we worked with a bigger team once we knew exactly what the story was. We worked with a bigger team then to work on all of those other aspects.
Hello, I've got a question about. I'm not an animator, by the way, but I know that sort of Joe does lovely sketches of sort of going to the jazz and things like that, and I like sketching just on my time off. What kind of things do you still sketch? I mean like that kind of, just letting your brain go free and it's not about work. So what sort of thing do you sketch if you do that?
A lot of people in profiles. I always draw people in profile. I think it's because I've just a strong profile myself. I don't know. So what I do, I sketch a lot still to try and figure things out. I try not to put pressure on them. I have that really horrible voice, going, that's no good, behind me all of the time. And I'm all constantly blown away by the skill and talent of other people. I thought at this point, like 20 years on, that I'd be really confident. And, but I'm not. And for me, drawing is still very personal and very vulnerable and still and I think maybe if it ceases to be that, then I need to get worried or something. So I know I draw I draw every day, still, but I tend not to post them up or anything like that. I just fill sketchbooks. Now I'm kind of a bit worried about posting stuff up on free software, kind of with AI, kind of looking at everything that you're doing. So I do. But I also love gardening. Is my big switch off thing, because I just think that's just getting all that dirt underneath your fingernails is really, really good, and it's really calming. And I don't listen to anything like that when I just try and.
It's because you're a farm girl.
Farm girl, yes, at heart, yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
I'm so sorry, pretty much out of time. We've got time for one last question, and we've got one over here.
Hi, Nora. Actually, I'm wondering, what was your motivation for making the breadwinner? Because you come from Ireland, and the story belongs to Kabul and Afghanistan. It's completely different, places. So that would be great if you explain to me.
Yeah, I've kind of 2 motivations. I had this little starlet car, this small car that I was driving in the late 90s. Driving into work one morning, I was always listening to the news, and I was on the news that Taliban were shutting down these bakeries that were run by widows in Kabul. And I got so angry. I just, because these widows had no other way of making a living. And it just made me really angry. And then I became aware that here's me driving into work in my car kind of thing, where I get to do something really expressive and ridiculous, making cartoons. And it made me really angry. My mum then, right, I don't think any of us are too far away from, the kind of... my mum was a midwife in the 1960s, and she worked in a hospital where she was, the women who were not married, who were going there to give birth, were treated really, really, really badly. And she had such humanity, my mum. And sorry, yeah, I just my, I just don't understand. I just don't understand why somebody would squash the rights of another human being. And we all do it in ways, I mean, I've got a phone in my handbag and you know, some of the precious metals that are in that phone, and you know, that go together to make the battery and all of that, are, you know, probably made by children, you know, in parts of the world where they have no option but to do that. You know, we're all part of, you know, something that we either don't realize that we're part of, or that we turn away from. And so if you know, if you can at all shine a light on something, and maybe, you know, I don't know, and looking at people like Sarah now, you know, and looking at that there are young women and, you know, powerful women who are using their creativity and their voice to inspire others. That's, you know, I look for the hope, and if I can be part of the hope, you know, because we're all contradictions, we're all part of the oppression, and we're part of the hope as well. And if we can just try and lean into the hope a little bit more, then we win in some way.
Well, I think, thank you so much, Nora. My question at the beginning was, how come this young girl from Cork who left school at 15 made such a success of her life? And I think you've just answered. I mean, you're so honest, you're so down to earth. You know, you're looking for good stories, true stories that are honest. It's all about honesty, I think, and you're very committed, and it's just a pleasure to listen to you. And anyway, thank you very much. It's fantastic.
Thank you,
Joanna.
I'm not going to say much, but you just wrapped that up way better than I ever could have. So, but can I just please one more time ask you to give a massive round of applause, and thank you so much to Joanna Quinn, Nora Twomey.